everyone and welcome back to our channel. So as you are all aware of the chapter which we had started, that is the urinary system, in which we have dealt with the different organs which belong to this system. We have dealt with the kidney in detail, also the nephron. So we have seen what are the different parts of the nephron and what are the functions which they carry out. Okay. So before going into the actual renal physiology, that is the urine formation, which is the main function of the kidney, which takes place within the nephrons. So we will talk about the various processes which are involved in this urine formation. Okay, so to understand the process of urine formation, we'll be talking about the formation of dilute as well as concentrated urine. But before that, you need to understand the basic renal physiology. What are those different processes which make it possible for the kidneys to form the urine? Okay, so we'll deal with these three basic processes. There are three basic processes which are involved in this process of urine formation within the nephrons and the collecting ducts. So these three processes include the glomerular filtration, the tubular reabsorption and the tubular secretion. So before going into these processes in detail, so let us recall what are the different parts of the nephron. So basically the nephron is divided into two parts, that is the renal corpuscle and the renal tubules. Correct? So renal corpuscle, it comprises of the glomerulus, that is a network of capillary, and the glomerular capsule, or it is also known as Bowman's capsule. So these are the two parts of the renal corpuscle. The renal tubules, into which the filtrate will enter, the filtration will take place at this level, right, at the capillary level which is present in the renal corpuscle. So the filtrate will enter into the renal tubules. So the first part of the renal tubules is the PCT, proximal convoluted tubules, then the loop of Henle, the descending and the ascending limb of loop of Henle, and the distal convoluted tubules. So from here the urine will be drained into the collecting ducts from several nephrons. Okay, so with this brief revision about the parts of the nephron, let's begin with these three basic processes which take place. So let us understand first what are these three processes. So the first one is the glomerular filtration. So as we have seen earlier that the urine formation, it starts with the filtration of the blood in the renal corpuscle, right? So as we have seen, now as you can see this particular picture, it reflects the nephron, right? Renal corpuscles and the renal tubules and collecting ducts. But is it the actual structure of your nephron? Yes, is it? The nephron, does it look like this? No, it is not. It is this particular picture, it is just a representative picture to depict the different processes which are involved at different levels. So for simplification, just the parts are signified over here. that is the renal corpuscle and the renal tubules. So that's your glomerular capsule, and this is the actually the network of capillaries, but it is just shown as one single blood vessel. It is not like this usually. It is a network of capillary, right? So for simplification of the process, it is shown like this, and further the tubules are denoted in the form of almost a straight tubule, but usually it is not like this. PCT and DCT, these are convoluted tubules, right? So they are highly coiled in nature, and the loop of Henle also we have seen that it is in the form of a hairpin structure, right? U-shaped structure, roughly you can say, a deep U-shaped structure. Okay, so let us talk about the first step, that is the glomerular filtration. So that's the first step in the urine production. So in your renal corpuscles, the capillary network, that is the glomeruli, they will be involved in the filtration of the blood plasma. Okay, so we have seen that through the capillaries, usually the plasma proteins and the formed elements do not filter. What will get filtered? Yes, the water and most of the solutes which are dissolved in the plasma, right? So all of them will get filtered out from these blood capillaries. So where they will enter now? They will cross this membrane and they will enter this capsular space, right? This is the capsular space. It is a double layered structure, visceral and the parietal layer, and the space in between is known as the capsular space. So your filtrate will enter in the capsular space, and from here it will move into the tubules. So this is the first step, the filtration of the blood plasma by the glomerulus. So there is a efferent arteriole which is bringing in the blood in the form of the capillaries. It will be divided into, and further it will reunite to form the efferent arteriole. So glomerulus is basically involved in the filtration of the blood, which is the first step in the urine production. Now once the fluid enters into the tubules, as they travel along these tubules, renal tubules and the collecting ducts, most of the fluid which is filtered at this glomerulus, it is reabsorbed. Okay, about 99% of the filtered water and the useful solutes, these are reabsorbed. Okay, tubular reabsorption. Why this process is known like that? That's because in the renal tubules, reabsorption is taking place. Reabsorption means what? Whatever filtrate reaches over here in these tubules, it is not that this process takes place only at this level. Throughout the tubules, this process of reabsorption will take place. At specific areas, specific solutes or water may get reabsorbed. We will talk about this in detail later on. Okay, so just to understand this process of tubular reabsorption. Now what do you mean by the term absorption? What do you mean by absorption? We have seen this term in the digestive system, right? The food which you consume, it gets digested into smaller particles, it gets digested by the action of enzymes into still smaller components, right, basic units. Like say for example carbohydrates, it breaks down into the glucose, which is then absorbed by the body. Now here why this process is known as reabsorption? That's because these particular solutes which might have been absorbed earlier, they are getting filtered over here, and rather than getting excreted out in the form of urine, these particular substances are re-entering your blood circulation. This is your blood circulation, right? Peritubular capillaries, these are supplying, right, to the tubules. So also the vasa recta, it basically supplies to the loop of Henle, right? So most of these water and the solutes, they are reabsorbed into the blood. So it will be returned back to the blood. It has got filtered from the blood, right? And it is being returned back to the blood, whatever is required. The water as well as the solute. So entire thing which is filtered over here, it will not get excreted out in the form of urine, but the important solutes as per the need of the body to maintain the homeostasis of the body, the water and the solutes will get reabsorbed. So this process of return of the substances back to the blood is known as tubular reabsorption. Then the third process is the tubular secretion. So as the filtrate is moving across these tubules, there are certain substances which are even secreted into these tubules. Say for example the waste or certain drugs or their metabolites, some excess ions which may be not required by the body. So required amount is retained and whatever is in excess, that is excreted out into this fluid. So this process of movement of the substances from the blood into the glomerular filtrate which is present in the tubules, this process is known as tubular secretion. So things are getting secreted into these fluid, into these tubules. Okay, so these are the three basic processes which take place in the nephrons and the collecting ducts and which aid in the maintenance of the homeostasis by maintaining the appropriate volume of the blood, the body fluids, the ionic content of the body by these three processes, that is the glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. Now, the solutes and the fluid which are drained out into the minor and the major calyces and the renal pelvis, that constitutes the urine. So further, once the fluid enters the calyces, no more absorption will take place or no more secretion will take place. So this particular fluid is now known as urine and this is excreted out. So certain solutes and the fluid or the water, it is excreted out of the body, right, in a certain amount. So how you will find out the rate of excretion of that particular solute? Urinary excretion. How, with what speed it is getting excreted out of the body? What is the rate of urinary excretion of that particular substance? So how you can find it out? Obviously now out of these three processes, that is filtration, secretion and reabsorption, these two processes, that is filtration and the secretion, what is happening to your solute in this process? Glomerular filtration, there is movement of the solute out of the blood. So it is as good as gone for excretion, right? What about the secretion process? What is happening to your substance? Again it is moving out of your blood, right, for excretion. But in the meantime, what is happening? There is one more process called reabsorption which will help in conservation, right? As per the need of the body, things will get reabsorbed. They will return back to the blood. So this particular process is responsible for movement of any substance into the body, back into the body, right? So how you will find out the net urinary excretion or the renal excretion of that particular substance? How you will calculate the rate of urinary excretion of a particular solute? So that will be given out by the rate of glomerular filtration plus the rate of secretion which is taking place of that particular solute, if at all, minus the rate of reabsorption, if at all that substance is getting reabsorbed. So, this will give you the net rate of the renal excretion of that particular substance, isn't it? So, these are the two processes which aid in the movement of this substance out for excretion, and this process is bringing it back. So, the rate of reabsorption needs to be deducted, correct. So, by carrying out these deep processes, the nephrons helps in maintenance of homeostasis of the body. It helps in maintaining the blood volume and the composition. So, indirectly it will help in maintaining the body fluids, the blood pressure, because the blood volume, it is one of the factor which determines the blood pressure, right. Larger the blood volume, higher will be the blood pressure, right. So, it helps in maintaining the homeostasis by controlling the blood volume. Okay. To start with the first process, so we will consider the glomerular filtration in this particular video. Okay. Now, as you all are familiar with this particular picture, that is a renal corpuscle, right. So, this is the afferent arteriole into which the blood will be flowing into the Bowman's capsule. So, these are the network of capillaries where actually the filtration will take place. So, the fluid will move out through the walls of these capillaries and it will enter into this capsular space. So, this particular fluid which is getting filtered into this renal corpuscle, so the one which is entering into your capsular space, that fluid is called as glomerular filtrate, and the fraction of blood plasma which is present over here in the afferent arterioles of the kidneys, which ultimately gets converted into the glomerular filtrate by the process of filtration. So, whatever amount of the water and the dissolved solutes or the plasma it enters into this capsular space, out of the blood, amount of blood which is present or presented to this renal corpuscles through these afferent arterioles, that particular amount is known as filtration fraction. So, out of the total volume of the blood which is presented over here, how much is getting converted into glomerular filtrate, that is known as the filtration fraction. So, this filtration fraction usually it is round about 0.16 to 0.20, that is 16 to 20% of the blood it gets filtered out. So, the components of the blood will get filtered out, but this particular value may not be constant, it may vary depending upon the health or the disease. From person to person it may vary, it does not remain the same, exactly same in all the individuals. Now, on an average the daily volume of the glomerular filtrate in the adults, it is around about 150 liters in females and 180 liters in males. That is per day. In females 150 liters of the filtrate is formed, the filtration process which takes place over 24 hours. It is responsible for filtration of 150 liters of the fluid or the filtrate, glomerular filtrate in the females, whereas it is 180 liters in the males. Can you imagine the amount of filtrate which is generated by your kidneys? But what is the amount of urine that is passed in 24 hours? How much of urine is passed? It is round about only 1 to 2 liters. Though your kidneys, both the kidneys together are filtering the fluids in liters, 150, 180, that is quite a huge amount, right? But comparatively, what is the amount of urine which is formed? That is just 1 to 2 liters. Now, why this is happening? That's because whatever is filtered over here, entire fluid will not get excreted out, right? Because apart from this filtration process, there are 2 more processes, right? Secretion and tubular reabsorption. So, this particular process of reabsorption, it absorbs more than 99% of the glomerular filtrate. So, it returns most of the filtrate back to the bloodstream by this particular process of tubular reabsorption. So, that is the reason why you do not lose all your important ionic contents. Otherwise, what will happen? If this process was not there, what would happen? Urine output would have been very huge, right? And what would happen to the water and the solutes? They would get excreted out in the urine, right? So, what will happen? Homeostasis will get disrupted, right? Normal levels of your solutes will not be maintained. So, for that matter, this process of reabsorption is very, very important. It helps in conservation of the water as well as the important solutes in the blood. Now, to understand this particular process of filtration, we need to understand the structure of the filtration membrane. Why this filtration of the blood? It filters only the water and the dissolved solutes or the smaller substances. Why not the blood cells or the plasma proteins? Why they are not getting filtered out? It's not normal to find the blood cells or the proteins in the urine. It's the sign of the damage to the kidneys, pathological situation. So, what prevents these substances from moving out of the capillaries? That's because of this special arrangement called as the filtration membrane. Now, where does the filtration takes place? In the renal corpuscle, right? Through these capillaries, the glomerulus which is present over here, network of capillaries. So, capillaries, what is present in the walls of the capillaries? What it is made up of? The capillary wall, yes, it is made up of the endothelium, right? Endothelial cells and the basement membrane will be present. You all must have studied in your CVS. Okay, so any substance which is dissolved along with the water, it can get filtered out through the capillaries because the gap in between these endothelial cells, these are quite large. Also, there are some pores which are present in certain endothelial cells which aid in the filtration. So, let us see what is the arrangement which is present in this particular wall, which makes it possible for the filtration to take place. So, it constitutes the filtration membrane. Now, what is the composition of this filtration membrane? The glomerular capillaries along with the podocytes. Can you all recall what are podocytes? Yes, these are the modified epithelial cells which are present in the visceral layer of your glomerular capsules, right? Here the parietal layer, it comprises of the simple squamous epithelial cells, but these ones, these epithelial cells, these are modified, the ones which form the visceral layer which is in contact with your capillaries. So, if you have carried out the activity with the balloon, the layer of the balloon which is in contact with your fist, that layer is called as the visceral layer. So, it is comprised of this specialized type of cells or modified types of cells known as podocytes, which has foot-like projections called as pedicels. Now, together with these podocytes, the endothelial layer, it comprises of the filtration membrane. So this leaky barrier, why it is called as a leaky barrier? That's because any substance can move out of it very easily, excepting the large ones like your formed elements and the plasma protein. So that's the composition of the filtration membrane. So this particular arrangement, it allows the filtration of the water as well as the small solutes. But what will happen? The plasma proteins, the blood cells and the platelets, they are not able to cross this membrane. So this particular filtration membrane, it comprises of 3 filtration barriers. So any solute which is present, this is the lumen of your capillary, okay, this one. So any substance to move out of this, from your blood capillary, it has to move out, right? So any substance to move out of these capillaries, it has to cross these 3 layers, 3 barriers rather. First one is the glomerular endothelial cells. Remember, the capillary wall, it is made up of endothelial cells, right? So that's the first barrier. Second one is the basal lamina. The basal lamina which is present over here, that's your second barrier. And the third one is the filtration slit, which is formed by the podocytes. These are the slits. As you can see, these openings over here, these are known as the filtration slits. So these are the 3 barriers which any substance needs to cross. Okay. Now let us talk about all of these one by one. So glomerular endothelial cells, these are quite leaky because they contain the fenestrations. Fenestrations means pores are present. These are the endothelial cells which are lining your blood capillaries. But what are present over here? As you can see that there are small pores which are present, right? So these pores measure round about 0.07 to 0.1 micrometer in the diameter. So any substance which is smaller than this size, it will leave the blood capillary. It can move out. Okay, but the blood cells and the platelets, will they be able to leave? No. Now, in between these podocytes and in between the blood vessels actually are present a specialized type of cells known as the mesangial cells. Mes means in the middle and angia means blood vessel. So these are the types of cells which are present in between the blood vessels. As you can see over here also, these are present in between the capillaries. So these contractile cells help in regulating the glomerular filtration rate through this filtration membrane. Then the second barrier, that is the basal lamina. So this is actually a layer which is present in between the capillary endothelium and the podocytes, right? This is your endothelium, that's your podocytes. So in between these two is present the basal lamina. So this comprises of the collagen fibers and the proteoglycans in a glycoprotein matrix. So this particular layer, it has negative charges in the matrix. So due to this negative charge at this particular layer, it prevents the filtration of the plasma proteins because these are negatively charged, right? So what will happen? Both the negative charge will repel, right? So any plasma protein which try to leave out, it will get repelled over here and it will enter back into your bloodstream. So this helps in preventing the plasma proteins from leaving the blood capillaries. So that's your second barrier. And coming to the third barrier, that is the slit membrane. Okay. So as we have seen that there is filtration slit which is present in between the pedicels. Now what are pedicels? These are the foot-like projections of your podocytes, right? So podocytes, they give out foot-like projections which are actually wrapping around your capillaries. So the space in between these pedicels, which are foot-like projections, so this space is known as the filtration slit. As you can see that there are slits, right? There are openings, small openings. These are known as filtration slits. So at this filtration slits, there is a thin membrane called as slit membrane. This one. So slit membrane is the one which is present in between these pedicels. So there is a thin layer of a membrane which permits the passage of substances which are having very small diameter. So it prevents the larger substances from getting filtered out. So only those substances with the size of less than 0.006 to 0.007 micrometer only can cross this particular slit membrane. So this include water, glucose, vitamins, amino acids, very small plasma proteins or ammonia, urea and certain ions. Only these substances are permitted to cross this particular slit membrane. So these are the three barriers which permit only the movement of selected substances out of these blood capillaries. So it will regulate what is the content of your glomerular filtrate which enters over here. Okay. So with this now you know how exactly the filtration is taking place. From where? What are the barriers which it has to cross? Now why this process is taking place? Why the blood which is entering over here into these capillaries, why it is moving out? And why only a specific amount of blood is moving out? What makes it possible for this blood to move out of these capillaries? That's made possible by this net filtration pressure. Now this process of filtration, it will depend upon three main pressures which are exerted at this renal corpuscle at different levels and towards different directions. Now out of these three, one pressure, it promotes the filtration. So it allows the fluid to leave the capillaries and move into the capsular space. And there are two processes or the two pressures which are opposing this particular process of filtration. So it is in the direction from the capsular space towards the lumen of the capillaries. So the net filtration pressure which makes it possible for this glomerular filtration to take place, that will depend upon these three pressures. So these are the glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure, GBHP is the accepted short form. Second one is the capsular hydrostatic pressure, CHP is the accepted short form. And third one is the blood colloid osmotic pressure or BCOP. So let us see which one is promoting the filtration and which are the two pressures which are actually opposing the filtration process. So coming to the first one, that is the glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure, GBHP. So as the name implies, this is the hydrostatic pressure of the blood which is present in these capillaries. So blood which is traveling along your blood vessels, it exerts a pressure on the walls of the blood vessels, right? So that's the hydrostatic pressure of the blood which is flowing through these capillaries. Imagine when your jumping into a swimming pool, what happens? You experience some force which is moving against you, right? That's the hydrostatic pressure of the water into which you are jumping. So similar type of pressure is exerted by this blood. So this pressure of the blood which is exerted on the walls of the capillaries, so it will be in the direction of walls of the capillaries, right? So in which direction it is exerting? Out of the capillaries, right? So it will promote the movement of your blood out of the capillaries. Blood in the sense the plasma. So this particular pressure is usually 55 mmHg. So it is forcing the water and the solutes which are present in the blood plasma through this filtration membrane which we have seen just now. So it will aid in movement of the substance from within the capillaries towards the capsular space. So this particular pressure, that's the glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure, and it is 55 mmHg. Now second pressure is the capsular hydrostatic pressure, CHP. Capsular hydrostatic pressure. So this capsular space, what does it contain now? Yes, it contains the glomerular filtrate, right? It is present in this capsular space, right, into which the blood is getting filtered out. So this fluid which is present over here, it will also exert some hydrostatic pressure, right, on these walls. So this particular pressure exerted by the fluid which is present over here, that is the glomerular filtrate, on the walls of these capillaries, can it move in this direction? Can it move out from here? Is it possible? No. Because here such fenestrations, slits are not present, right? So in which direction this fluid can move? It will exert the pressure towards the capillaries, right? And that pressure is known as the capsular hydrostatic pressure. So in which direction it is pushing your fluid? Towards the capillaries. So isn't it in the opposite direction to your filtration? Filtration takes place from here to here, right? But in which direction this pressure is getting exerted? From the capsular space towards your capillaries. So it is opposing the filtration process, right? It's a back pressure which is pushing the fluid into the reverse direction, and this pressure accounts for 15 mmHg, quite less as compared to the GBHP, right? But it is opposing the filtration. The third type of pressure is the blood colloid osmotic pressure, BCOP. Now blood colloid osmotic pressure, colloid. What do you mean by a colloid? Colloid means some solutes which are present in a solvent. They can form a colloid. Actually, it depends upon the size of the solutes which are present into a particular solvent. Now, your blood contains a number of solutes, right, which are present. Say for example, the proteins such as albumin, globulin, fibrinogen, which are present in the blood plasma. So these will act as the solute or the colloid. So they will exert an osmotic pressure. Now what will happen? Now due to the solutes which are present over here, what will happen? It can pull on the solvent. Remember this particular process of osmosis. Now supposing this is a semi-permeable membrane, and if there is a solution which is present over here within this, and there is a solvent which is present over here, and there is a solution which contains the solutes, and this is your semi-permeable membrane. What can happen over here? This contains dissolved solutes, right? So it acts as a colloid. Now here there are no solutes which are present, there is solvent only. So what will happen, and this is a semi-permeable membrane. So what can happen? The solvent will move into this. The solutes which are present, they will exert an colloid osmotic pressure. They will try to pull the solvent. The process of movement of this solvent, what is it known as? This particular process where only the solvent moves, that is known as osmosis, which you all must have studied in your physical pharmaceutics. So similar type of pressure is also exerted by the colloid. Your blood acts as a colloid and it exerts an osmotic pressure. And which direction your solvents can move now? From here to here, right? Because are the proteins present over here in this filtrate? Proteins don't get filtered, right? They are present only here. So in which direction this pressure will be? Of course, from the capsular space into the capillaries. Okay, so that's your blood colloid osmotic pressure, which is pulling on the fluids which are present in the capsular space. So this pressure will be exerted from the capsular space towards your capillary. So isn't it in the opposite direction of your filtration? Yes. So this is also opposing the filtration process. So this pressure is also exerting in the opposite direction. It is round about 30 mmHg. So these are the three processes which we have seen, which are responsible for the alteration in the glomerular filtration, right? So these are the three pressures rather which are acting in the specific direction. So out of this we have seen that is one is promoting the filtration, that is the glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure is actually promoting the filtration, right, moving of the fluid out of the capillaries, whereas these two, that is the capsular hydrostatic pressure and the blood colloid osmotic pressure, they are opposing the filtration, right. So how you will find out the net filtration pressure? What will be the net filtration pressure which is responsible for the glomerular filtration to take place? How you will find out? That is the pressure which promotes the filtration minus the pressure which is opposing the filtration, right. So that is glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure minus the capsular hydrostatic pressure minus the blood colloid osmotic pressure. So you need to deduct these from the actual glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure. So what is your net filtration pressure now? By substituting the values, we have seen that the glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure, how much it is? It is 55. So 55 mmHg minus the capsular hydrostatic pressure, how much it is? That is 15 mmHg minus the blood colloid osmotic pressure, which is again opposing. So you are deducting it. So what is it? 30 mmHg. So what will be the net filtration pressure? It is 55 minus 45, right? 55 mmHg is promoting the filtration, whereas 15 plus 30, that is 45 mmHg is opposing the filtration. So what is your net filtration pressure? 55 minus 45, that is 10 mmHg. This is your net filtration pressure. So it's only a pressure of about 10 mmHg which is responsible for the entire filtration process which takes place, right. So just 10 mmHg is responsible for the glomerular filtration to take place. Okay, so this is to do with the glomerular filtration, the process of filtration. So we have seen the different layers of the membrane which it has to cross in the form of the filtration membrane, and we have seen the pressure differences which make it possible for this filtration to take place. Now there is one parameter which can be measured over here, which denotes the normal functioning of the kidney, that is the glomerular filtration rate. This is quite an important point. The GFR, this is the accepted short form for the glomerular filtration rate. So this will tell you about the health of the kidney, whether the kidneys are filtering the fluids properly or no, at a proper rate. So it's a rate, right, the speed at which the filtration is taking place. That's quite important, the filtration rate. Now what is glomerular filtration rate? This is the amount of filtrate which is formed, over here in all the renal corpuscles. This is very important. All the renal corpuscles of both the kidneys each minute. So per minute, how much of filtrate is getting formed in both the kidneys? That is the glomerular filtration rate. So each kidney contains round about 1 million nephrons, right? So taken together, the total amount of the filtrate which is formed in all the nephrons of both the kidneys per minute, that is the glomerular filtration rate. And in adults, the normal value is 125 ml per minute in males, and it is 105 ml per minute in case of females. So these are the normal average values. It may vary, it will not remain exactly the same in all the individuals or even in the same person at different times. It may vary a little bit. It might not be the same. You will not find it exactly 125 ml per minute or exactly 105 ml per minute in females. But it should be roughly 125 ml per minute in males and 105 ml per minute in the females. So that will tell you about the rate of filtration, with what speed the filtration is taking place in both the kidneys. So you can say that the kidneys, by carrying out this process of filtration, will help in maintenance of the homeostasis of the body fluids. Okay, by maintaining the constant GFR, it is allowing only a specific amount of fluid to get filtered out. Now supposing if the GFR is too high, what will happen? Supposing if this filtration is taking place at a very fast rate, more than normal, more than 125 or 105, what will happen? If this rate is fast, obviously the fluid will travel through these tubules very fast, right? So what will happen? It will pass too quickly through these tubules. So what will happen? As it travels, two more processes are taking place, right? So what will happen to these two processes? They will get affected. Mainly this is very important, right? Rather than this one, tubular reabsorption, because entire thing which is filtered, that need not be excreted out of the body in the form of urine, right? Most of it gets reabsorbed into the blood, right? Otherwise what will happen? If GFR is too high, everything will pass in the form of urine and the reabsorption process will get affected. So your important solutes or the water may be lost from the body. On the contrary, what will happen if the GFR is too low? If it is too low, what will happen? This solution, it will travel at the slower rate, right? So as it travels slowly, what will happen? Almost all the filtrate may get reabsorbed. Even certain waste products may not be excreted out adequately. Okay. So this GFR is very important, the glomerular filtration rate. So this will be determined by the net filtration pressures. Okay. So it is related to these pressures. If there are more pressures which are acting, which promote the filtration, what will happen? If this is very high, what will happen? Obviously the glomerular filtration rate also will be higher, right? So this is quite very important aspect which needs to be monitored. Okay. So any change in this net filtration pressure will affect the GFR. Say for example, there is severe blood loss. What will happen? the blood volume will get reduced, right? So low volume means what? The blood pressure will be decreased, right? It will reduce the blood pressure. So as a result of this, what will happen? Low blood pressure meaning what will happen? The pressure which is exerted by the blood on the capillary walls, that will also get decreased, right? The hydrostatic pressure also will be reduced. So what will happen to your GFR? Obviously, it will reduce, right? GFR will get reduced. So that's not a good sign, right? Now say for example this pressure, it drops to 45, what will happen? What we have seen, net filtration pressure, it's 55 minus 45, right? Opposing forces are 45 mmHg. Supposing this pressure becomes 45, what will happen? 45 minus 45, 0 mmHg. What will happen then? If it becomes 0, will the filtration take place? No, it will not take place, because this difference in pressure makes it possible for this filtration to take place. So what will happen? The filtration will cease if the blood pressure drops. On the contrary, what will happen if the pressure rises? What happens if this rises? What should happen to your GFR? Obviously it should increase, right? If this is more, obviously the net filtration pressure will be high. So what should happen to the GFR? That should also increase, right? But it does not happen so. Over a range of 80 to 180 mmHg of the blood pressure, the GFR nearly remains constant. That's because it is adjusted because of the autoregulations within the kidney. Okay, so there are two mechanisms which regulate this glomerular filtration rate, that is by adjusting the blood flow into and out of the glomerulus. So that will determine how much of blood is flowing through, that will determine the pressure differences and the glomerular filtration rate. And the second mechanism is by altering the glomerular capillary surface area which is available for filtration, this surface area. Obviously when the surface area will change, filtration will also change, right? Smaller the surface area, slower will be the rate of filtration, right? So these are the two main ways by which the GFR can be adjusted. Okay, so as the blood flow increases into these capillaries, the GFR will also increase. So by the alteration in the diameter of the blood vessels, the blood flowing through this glomerulus can be altered, and that's how the adjustments in the filtration rate can be made possible. If vasoconstriction takes place in this area, what will happen? Vasoconstriction means if the diameter reduces, what will happen to the blood entering into these capillaries? Obviously it will decrease, right? So low blood flow means low GFR, right? Less of it will get filtered out away. Okay, so that's how the adjustments of the GFR can take place. So there are three main mechanisms which can control the GFR, that is the renal autoregulation, neural regulation and the hormonal regulation. So the first one is the renal autoregulation of the GFR. So let's talk about the renal autoregulation. Autoregulation meaning the kidney is itself adjusting the GFR. When you are resting, the GFR will be different than when you are exercising, right? So what makes it possible to adjust this rate of GFR? As pressure changes, GFR will also change, right? But why it doesn't change? Why it fairly remains constant? That's because kidneys themselves are regulating this GFR. So this auto-regulation, it comprises of two mechanisms, the myogenic mechanism and the tubuloglomerular feedback. So these two mechanisms will keep this GFR fairly constant over a wide range of the systemic blood pressures. In between the 80 and 180 mmHg, the GFR does not change much, right? Okay, so that's possible because of these two mechanisms. Now let us see what is this myogenic mechanism. Myo means muscle and genic means producing. Now this myogenic mechanism, it occurs when the stretching, it triggers the contraction of these smooth muscles. So as the smooth muscles contract, the blood pressure within these blood vessels will rise. As a result of this, what will happen to the GFR? That will also rise. However, the increase in the blood pressure as it stretches the walls of these efferent arterioles, in response to this, the smooth muscle fibers, they will contract, right, because of the feedback mechanism. So as a result of this, what will happen to the lumen of the arterioles? It will narrow down. So because of this, what will happen? The blood flowing to these capillaries, it will get reduced. So because of this, the GFR also will get reduced, right? Now opposite thing will happen when the arterial blood pressure drops. The smooth muscles are stretched less because of the drop in the pressure, so they will relax. So as a result of which, what will happen? The efferent arterioles, they will dilate. So dilatation of these efferent arterioles, it will increase the blood flow and this will result in increase in the GFR. So it will help in normalizing the altered GFR within seconds after the change in the blood pressure. So according to the alteration in the blood pressure, the flow is adjusted and the GFR also will get automatically adjusted. Now the second contributor to this autoregulation is a tubuloglomerular feedback. That's because here macula densa, why it is known as tubuloglomerular feedback? That's because here the part of renal tubules, that is the macula densa, it provides the feedback. Remember the macula densa, the last part of the loop of Henle, it makes contact with the efferent arterioles, right, and the cells in this particular region where it is in contact with, these are crowded, that's why it is known as macula densa. So along with it, the modified smooth muscles in your blood vessels, which are juxtaglomerular cells, it is known as the juxtaglomerular apparatus. So it is the juxtaglomerular apparatus which is providing the inputs over here. So when the GFR is above normal, if due to disruption of the homeostasis, if it increases the GFR, this macula densa, it will sense the composition of the filtered fluid. So what will happen? As the GFR increases, the fluid will flow too quickly, right? So what will happen to the reabsorption processes? It doesn't take place normally, right? So most of the ions and the water, it gets very less time to get reabsorbed, right? So that's why most of these solutes, okay, most of these ions and the water, it reaches the macula densa. So this increase in the amount of these ions and water, it is sensed by the macula densa. So this juxtaglomerular apparatus, which comprises of this macula densa and the modified smooth muscles, it will sense this increase in the levels of these ions, that's Na plus. So as a result of this increased levels of ions and water, it will inhibit the release of nitric oxide from this juxtaglomerular apparatus. What is nitric oxide? It is endothelium dependent relaxing factor. It is responsible for relaxation of the smooth muscles in the blood vessels, right? So as a result of this nitric oxide release, it will result in vasodilatation in the blood vessels. As a result of inhibition of this release of nitric oxide, what will happen to your afferent arterioles? NO is responsible for the vasodilatation. So what will happen? Its release is inhibited. So what will happen to the smooth vessels? They will contract and will result in constriction of these afferent arterioles. So as a result of this constriction of the afferent arterioles, what will happen to the blood flowing through your glomerulus? Yes, it will get reduced. Less blood will flow, and less blood flow means GFR will reduce. Okay, so it is brought back to normal now, which was increased, it has been decreased now. And what will happen if this glomerular filtration rate decreases? What will happen? If the filtration rate decreases, there will be more time for these ions to get reabsorbed, right? So what will happen to the levels of these ions and water? It will be decreased, right? If there is low level of these ions, what will happen? This macular densite will sense it, and what will happen to the generation of the NO? It was inhibited, right? Now what will happen? It will increase the levels of the nitric oxide, and what nitric oxide causes? It results in the vasodilatation. So what will happen? Vasodilatation in the afferent arterioles. As it takes place, what will happen to the blood flow? The blood flow will increase, right? So if it increases, what will happen to your GFR, which was decreased? Yes, it will increase the GFR. So it will bring back to the homeostasis. Okay, so this is the auto regulation of the GFR. Then coming to the next type of regulation, that is the neural regulation of the GFR. So like most of the blood vessels, even these blood vessels are supplied by the sympathetic system of the autonomic nervous system. So it's the norepinephrine, which is the neurotransmitter which is released, and it is responsible for the vasoconstriction by activation of the alpha 1 receptors, adrenergic receptor. So what will happen? Because of the vasoconstriction, the contraction of the smooth muscles in the afferent arterioles, it will result in the vasoconstriction. So what will happen? It will result in decrease in the blood flow, right? Blood flow will get reduced. So what will happen to your GFR? It will get reduced. Now at rest, this sympathetic stimulation, it is low. Okay. So here at this condition, renal autoregulation takes care of the GFR. But with moderate sympathetic stimulation, both the afferent as well as efferent arterioles will constrict to the same degree. So blood flowing into and out of the glomerulus, it is restricted, right, because of the vasoconstriction of both these. This diameter will reduce. So what will happen? Blood flowing in as well as out, it will get decreased. So here only slight decrease in the GFR will take place. But with greater sympathetic stimulation, say for example when you are exercising, or in case of hemorrhage, vasoconstriction of the afferent arterioles will predominate. So this constriction at these afferent arterioles will take place more as compared to this one. So incoming blood is getting reduced. So what will happen to your GFR? Yes, obviously it will decrease the GFR. Okay. So it will result in fall in the GFR. So as a result of this, urine output will get reduced, so also it will permit the greater blood flow to other body tissues, right, because here the blood flow is reducing to your renal corpuscles. And the next type of regulation is the hormonal regulation of the GFR. So there are two hormones which are involved in the regulation of the GFR, that is angiotensin 2, it helps in reducing the GFR, and the atrial natriuretic peptide ANP, that is increasing the GFR. Now let us see how it is increasing or decreasing the GFR. The angiotensin 2, it's actually a potent vasoconstrictor. Of course, we will be dealing with this angiotensin 2, how it is generated in the renin angiotensin aldosterone system also. Okay. So remember that angiotensin 2, it is a vasoconstrictor. So what will happen? It will narrow the afferent as well as efferent arterioles. So as a result of this, the renal blood flow, it will get reduced. So what will happen to your GFR? It will get reduced. Now apart from that, the cells of the atria of the heart, they produce a hormone called as atrial natriuretic peptide ANP. So as the walls of the atria stretch, it is sensed due to the increase in the blood volume, the walls of atria will stretch more, right. So as a result of this, hormone called as atrial natriuretic peptide is released. So this particular hormone, it causes the relaxation of the glomerular mesangial cells. Remember mesangial cells which are present in between the blood vessels. So by causing relaxation of these cells, it increases the surface area of these capillaries which is available for filtration. Now, as the filtration area increases, what will happen to your glomerular filtration? Obviously, it will increase, right? So as a result of this, it will increase the urine output. Okay, glomerular filtration rate will be increased. So this is the summary of the regulation of the GFR. The autoregulation, that is myogenic mechanism, decreases the urine output. Even the tubuloglomerular feedback, it also decreases if it is increased and increases if it is decreasing. Neural regulation, it decreases the urine output due to the increase in sympathetic system stimulation. Angiotensin 2 vasoconstrictor decreases the GFR, and atrial natriuretic peptide, it increases the GFR. Okay. So from this, what we can conclude, there are different factors which are affecting the GFR. So these can be summarized as follows. The renal blood flow is an important factor. More the blood flow into your kidney, faster will be the GFR. The renal blood pressure or your blood pressure, if it is high, GFR will be high. The diameter of the afferent and efferent arterioles, if the diameter of afferent arteriole, if it is more blood will flow, GFR will increase. The surface area of filtration, if it is more, GFR will be increased. The net filtration pressure, more the net filtration pressure, greater will be the rate of the filtration. There are two hormones also, that is angiotensin 2 and the atrial natriuretic peptide, which either decrease or increase the GFR respectively. Another important factor is the number of nephrons. Obviously, if the nephrons get damaged, what will happen to your GFR? That will also get reduced, right? Will it remain normal? No, because the number of nephrons are getting reduced, right? So this is again an important factor. Okay. So with this, we have finished with the glomerular filtration as a part of the renal physiology, which is a very important process. Okay. This is the reference. Thank you for watching.